Hi there, I'm Nate Adams, and I'm a little under the weather today, but we're going to talk about energy monitors anyway. So these are three energy monitors that we have used in our practice, and we've used them for over a year now. So we've got a pretty good idea of what their strengths and weaknesses are. And I like to think in frameworks. So it's not just looking at spec sheets and deciding what's better and what's worse. I want to understand how useful is it in understanding uh, what's going on in a client's home or in my own home, uh, and how easy is it to install, how easy is it to use, things like that. So we're going to talk about a framework. And full disclosure, Curb actually gave me 2 units and paid to install them in my house. The Sense I bought myself and installed myself. And the eGauge 3000, the third one, was actually bought by a client and they paid to install it. I made some adjustments so it actually was useful data. Um, but that's full disclosure there. And also, legal notes, if you are at all nervous at installing one of these, please hire an electrician. Um, it is possible to install these as a DIYer. I've done a number of them, but use your head, shut the power off, and if you're nervous, call an electrician. Okay, all that out of the way. Let's talk just top level before we really even dig into things. So the Sense is one of my favorites. It has by far the fastest setup of the three that I worked with. This only took me about 25 minutes to get in, where the other ones are hours of work to get done well. And the app for this product is really, really good. It's by far the best app, but it's only mobile, it's not web. The Curb took a long time to set up, although this is not unique for this variety of energy monitor. And Curb has hands down the best usage chart where you can see what's using power when, and I find it very useful. The eGauge is obviously a commercial product. You can tell that they're aiming at commercial buildings, and they have by far the best data access. They also feel just a little bit old school, which is kind of funny talking about energy monitors because they haven't been around that incredibly long. All right, so let's talk framework of these things. Sense versus Curb versus the eGauge 3000. So here's 5 things that I find most important for deciding which one of these things you're going to buy. So the first one is how easy or hard is it to install? And it's really easy or it's hard. There isn't an in the middle. How good are the apps? And is it a web app or a mobile app? How does it serve as an odometer or a speedometer? How easy is it to export data out of it? And are reverse polarities an issue where you have a circuit saying that it's making power instead of using power? Okay, so for easy and hard install, there's really 2 things to consider. There's just 2 different main kinds of these. There's machine learning ones where they only clamp on to the 2 mains. So every American house has 110 coming in 2 legs. So you have, if you add them together, you get 220. So you clamp each one of those, and that's all that gets clamped with a CT or a current transmitter clamp. Or there's the other variety, which is a multiple circuit energy monitor, and these clamp each or most of the individual circuits in the circuit breaker box. Those are characteristically much harder to install well. So when it comes to the machine learning, there's 2 of them that I'm aware of, Neurio, which I haven't tried, and Sense, which I have. This is what Sense looks like when it shows up. So this is on my back porch, and all it has are these 2 CT clamps. And here's what they look like installed. These are the 2 CT clamps in white you can see, and you can see a whole pile of other black stuff. This is all for the Curb, the 2 Curbs actually that are on my box. But the only other piece of Sense is the actual unit over here. So you have the unit and 2 CT clamps, and then you have to wire it in for power, and that's it. There's not a lot to it, so it's a pretty fast and easy install. The other variety, like I said, is a multiple circuit energy monitor, And so this is the curb, this is the eGauge. If you see the energy detective, it's the same kind. There's a number of different manufacturers who make ones like this. So these are the most common variety. This is what the curb box looks like. It's got two big CT clamps for the mains, a bunch of little ones for the individual circuits, and then a couple of in the middle ones for circuits that pull a lot of power, say an electric water heater or the air conditioner or the electric stove, things like that. This is what the two of them look like installed. So this is the curb before I put the sense in. So you can see it's just a pile of wires around here, and then there's some more in my sub panel. And then this is the eGauge installed, and you can see how it has a number of different CT clamps on various circuits. So there's a lot to installing these. So the curb took me a good while. They say a 45-minute install. Unless you're superhuman, I don't know how you're going to pull that off because my circuits were not wired or they were not labeled, so I didn't know what went where. So it took a couple of hours to figure out all 30-some circuits that are in my house. And then I realized that I had some mislabeled and miswired, and so I had to make some adjustments. So it takes some time to put these in, so be prepared for that. But if this sounds good to you, because to some it will, and I actually found it enjoyable, then this could be a good system for you. All right, now the multiple circuits, here's what makes them better potentially. So rather than guessing at how much each individual circuit or each individual appliance is using, you will know because every single one is going to be monitored, at least if you have enough CT clamps to do your whole box. So most of these, by the way, monitor between 16 and 24 circuits. And you always have to subtract 2 because 2 go to the main clamps, and then the rest actually serve to watch what else is going on inside your electric box. So this is the Curb app, and it's well, this is the web app, and it's a really nice one. So this is their radar chart, as they call it, and it shows how many watts are being used at any given moment, right in the middle. You can select between watts and dollars per month, dollars per week, dollars per day. They've got a bunch of different ways to slice and dice the data. But it's this chart here that makes Curb really nice. So they color code what's going on. And so right here you can see what this green one was. It's the quad outlet. So I've got 4 outlets in my kitchen that run the microwave, and I've got a bunch of other devices there that use a lot of power. So there's the hot pot and the coffee pot and the blender and the toaster. So that particular quad pulls a lot of power. And so you can see what's going on right there. You can roll over and see what the other things are that are going on as well. You can see what the recent use is, so you can roll over these and it will tell you how much power was used by each circuit over the last 24 hours. You can see how much energy has been used since the last billing cycle, which they start on the 1st. You get to see how much power is used and where the wattage is usually at. And then this can be a problematic one, which we'll come back to in a little bit. But if you do have a solar system, which I don't, and note that there shouldn't be anything in production, if you have a solar system, you can watch how much those solar panels are producing. So all of these systems have a solar setup. Okay, like I said earlier, with machine learning, all you can do is hope that you'll know how much each appliance uses, because it doesn't find every single one, nowhere near, and oftentimes it will confuse them. So this is Sense's app, and you can see it makes these lovely little bubbles, which is pretty cool, and it says coffee maker. Now, it is far from perfect, so the coffee maker is also my dishwasher, according to Sense, so it's not perfect by any means. There's a bubble for what's always on, and then there's a bubble for stuff that it hasn't figured out yet. And it's really kind of a detective process figuring stuff out. It'll tell you that there's unknown motor number 17, and you have to go figure out what that is by turning it on and off. And then you can program this thing. it's a pretty cool little setup. All right, let's keep going though. So things to consider: app quality and looking at mobile versus web. So let's start with eGauge because it's the simplest, it's kind of old school, and they only have a web app. So this is the app. This is a project that we helped out with a few years ago called the Treehouse at Hiram College. It's a case study on the Energy Smart website, one of the 1900 ones. And this is a pretty nice setup. So you can see what the summary is for the time period shown on the graph, and you can click all of these things between 1 year and 10 minutes. So you can zoom way out or zoom way in, but you are somewhat limited, at least here, in what you're going to zoom in and out on. You can click this down arrow and select any time period you want by keying it in. But there isn't the nice zoom in, zoom out. Like I've seen my 4-year-old daughter trying to zoom in on something in print because she's so used to it on the iPad or the iPhone. You can't do that with this, but it will show you how much power was used in whatever the time period is on this graph, and it'll show you the summary for the last 30 days, or you can do a drop down and get a different time period as well. You can see where it goes up and down, so I know that this is the hot water kicking on, and you can actually see down here I've got the checkbox checked here for hot water, and then you can see where the hot water is kicking on in this red dotted line. That's what caused a lot of the usage in this building. And then you can see at the moment that I screenshotted this, it was using 5,547 watts. So you get to see a fair amount of information, but it's not nearly as pretty of a chart as the curb, as we looked at before. I mean, this is just, it's a pretty chart. It's easy to see what's going on. It covers up the ranges here. Now, curb does not give you much in the way of options of selecting time periods, at least not that I have found. So there's 3 hours, there's 1 day, there's a week, there's a month, and there's a year, or there's all. And that's it. That's what you get. So you're a little bit limited on what time period you can select. But their chart is really, really good. So this is their web app. Their mobile app is very similar. So you can see basically they adapted the web app to become a mobile app. They used to be a little bit different. Now they're essentially the same. But I do really like how you can see how many watts are being used at any given moment. You can click the more info and it will show you exactly what is being used by individual circuits. You can see what's been used in the last 24 hours. There's a lot of information you can find out so that moment by moment you can understand what's going on. We'll get into a weakness of curb here in a little bit, where it's not as good of an odometer, but it's a really good speedometer, and their app is quite good. So their mobile app, if you turn it sideways, it turns into this chart, and you can see what's going on. You can roll over things like you can on the web. Now, Sense has this amazing app for your phone, but they do not have a web app at all. So this is all you get. But like I showed earlier, it has these different bubbles that pop up. So at this moment, it thought that it knew where all of the energy in my house was going. So the dehumidifier uses a fair amount. And what's cool is if you click these buttons, it will tell you how many watts that individual appliance is pulling. The curse is they don't always add up. So I could probably add all of these together, and I'd probably get a 1100, 1200 watts, even though it says 992. The usage does seem to match up at the end of the month with my energy bills, but this can be a little bit funky. So don't trust these absolutely, but it's not bad. Now, if you click up here, so you can see on this, but if you click on the bar chart, you get this instead. This you can zoom in and out of to your heart's content. So if you want to zoom out and see what's been going on for the last year, and then zoom back in on 3 seconds that happened back last May, you can do that. and I talked briefly to the folks at Sense, and they said that was a lot of work and a lot of programming difficulty, so they were happy to hear that that was something desirable. This is something that I find that I really, really like in apps, and of the indoor air quality monitors, which I've spent a lot of time with, really only NetAtmo does that, but NetAtmo doesn't measure a lot of things that I care about. So this app has that capability and also measures things a bunch of different ways. Okay, so let's keep going as well. Let's talk about odometer versus speedometer. So this is the speedometer of a car, which tells you exactly how fast you're going at any given moment. And then the odometer is down here, which shows you how far you've gone. So this is an analog to energy monitors, because speedometer is how much energy am I using right now in watts. And then the odometer side is how much energy have I used over a given period. And these devices have very different strengths and weaknesses. So the eGauge does a pretty good job with both. But what you can't see is, if you can see where the red dotted line is, I can select multiple things to look at. So like the classroom quad, or the heat pumps here, which is the heat and AC. And all it does is give me more of identical dotted lines. So it's not super useful for figuring out what's going on. And there's no way to really pull out what individual circuits are using that I've found. So eGauge, if I'm wrong, leave a comment. But I didn't find it super useful for figuring out what was going on circuit by circuit. But when it comes to speedometer, you've got this function over here where that goes up and down depending on how much energy the building's using. And then you've got two different odometers here. So you've got an odometer over whatever the period is in the graph, and you've got an odometer that defaults to the last 30 days. So this is pretty good. So it works really well. The designer in me, being married to a designer, doesn't like the looks of this quite as well, but it's very functional and very useful. Curb as a speedometer, like I said, does super well. As an odometer, though, it's not easy to get the data out of, and I'll show this in the video that I'll do shortly, where I give you a live demo of each one of these. But you have to click over here and then download, and you can only get the selected periods that I can find. So as far as getting data out of Curb, it's not super easy. Now they do give you a weekly energy audit, as they call it. And it shows you how much was used in dollars for each of the circuits that pulled the most power. But there's a big hole here, which will be the last thing we talk about. There should be no negative power use, and this is showing negative $1.83. So something's goofy, because there's nothing in my house producing power. Everything is using power, and you can see it down here as well, where I use 57, but then it says I produce 7. So something's fishy, and we'll get into that. The weekly energy audit from Curb also shows in a alphabetical order how much each circuit used. So it can be really helpful, and this actually shows you the individual usage of the circuit, where in the last piece of it, it only shows you the dollars and the percentage. Now, the Sense also does a really good job with speedometer, like the Curb does, where you can see all the different things that are running at the same time. So that's pretty awesome. But where I really fell in love with the Sense is their odometer function. So you can see how much energy was being used by the day, week, month, or year. And then when you're selected on, say, the day here, you can see hour by hour what's going on. So you can see in the morning here, it was probably, kicking the electric hot water heater on. We have a heat pump hot water heater. running, making toast, coffee, tea, all of that sort of thing, all got spiked here. And then the total usage was 32 kilowatt hours, and then it breaks it down by period of what used that power. So in this case, it didn't know what most of the usage was that day. But this is a really, really nice function that lets you understand when energy is used in your home and how much. You can see the big days from the small days. There's a lot of different things you can see. So from an odometer perspective, this is pretty amazing for being able to figure out what happened pretty quickly. So you can select it by the week as well, and this actually shows a big weakness of all of the monitors if they use Wi-Fi. But you can see that Saturday, for whatever reason, we used more power than we did the other days. Monday, I know this was a data connection problem. So with all of these smart home devices, the biggest weakness of them seems to be the Wi-Fi connection. Periodically, they just drop their Wi-Fi connection and you lose the data. So Monday surely used a lot more power than that, but we'll never know because the data is gone. So it is what it is. Speaking of data, the eGauge has the best data export hands down. Neither of the other two comes anywhere close. So in the eGauge screen, if you click the down arrow, you can set what time period you want to put in the graph and then export that data to a spreadsheet. This is a really nice setup. So very easy to get data out of and whatever time period you want. Curb, like I mentioned earlier, if you click the little hamburger button that's up there, there's a download data button, but it only downloads what is on the screen at that moment, which is limited to 3 hour, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, and all. So you're fairly limited in what you can download. The Sense, as beautiful as this chart is, there's no way that I know of to get data out of it. So if you want to slice and dice the numbers and put them into a spreadsheet, don't buy the Sense. Personally, I don't really like slicing and dicing numbers that much with spreadsheets. So this tells me what I want to know, and it gives me a visual representation. This is adequate for my purposes, unless I really want to understand what's going on. The last thing to consider are reverse polarities. So we've touched on these, but it is impossible for my house to create energy. There's nothing in my house that makes energy. Everything uses energy. And all you have to do is reverse the CT clamp. So these are the CT clamps, and you can see that the label is facing up in both cases. If you turn one of these CT clamps over, and then you can't see the label, that will say that that circuit is producing energy rather than using energy. And it's really easy to reverse that when you're trying to wedge one of these CT clamps into the electric box, which is too full already. And then you end up with circuits showing negative power usage. So this was a huge problem with eGauge. The electricians who put it in didn't check to make sure that it was accurate, so they hooked it up what looked correctly. It was hooked up, but a bunch of these CTs were flipped. And this is a good example of it. So you can see that it said this is a 1 day period, it used 5.5 kilowatt hours. But over 30 days, it used 8.64 kilowatt hours. That's crazy. This is not a high usage time, but that building should have still used 400, 500, 600 kilowatt hours for the month, showing 8.64. It just happened to be that the ones that were reversed almost exactly offset the ones that were correct. So it basically looked like the building didn't use any energy at all. And it meant that this data was useless. There was nothing good that came out of it. So this is the date that I spent some time with eGauge on the phone, and to their credit, they were extremely helpful getting this figured out and reversed. And now I trust the data that's coming out of it. So here's the data coming out of it now. You can see this is December 6th of 2016, and the building used quite a bit of power, 68.7 kilowatt hours. It's an all-electric building, so this is heating and cooling. Um, and then it used almost 2,000 kilowatt hours, or 1.97 megawatt hours for the month before. So you can tell that that 8.64 was totally off base, like nowhere close to where it should be. Um, and then each one of these spikes, I know in this case, is from the hot water heater firing. It's an electric water heater, and there's some issues there, we'll just say. But this data I now trust because the reverse polarities where the CT clamps were backwards got fixed. So that's what's going on here. And actually, the reason that there's now production showing with Curb, because now this is looking at the Curb weekly energy audit. It used to have a plus-minus function that you could reverse whatever the CT clamp was saying, but in the updates that has gone away, and the only way that I've found the plus-minus is to reclassify one of these circuits from a regular circuit to a power producing one, like a solar one, and then plus or minusing that to get it so it looks like it's using energy, and then I kind of sort of get something accurate. The curb setup on my house is still pretty goofy, and frankly I've run out of patience with it, and I don't really intend to fix it. But in the two other installs that I've either helped with or overseen, I trust the numbers on both of those. So since, though, I suspect, but I don't know for sure, if you do reverse the polarity on one of these, the software will see that and correct for it. So I don't know that you can screw up that install where you really can with the Curb and the eGauge, because I've either goofed up both of those other two or had to fix a system that was goofed up. So that's a pretty deep dive into these three, and hopefully it helps you understand what to look for. But just to run over it again, easy versus hard install. If you want a machine learning system like Sense or Neurio, very easy to install, but you may not get the data you want out the other side. The more difficult install is all of the other varieties, and if you goof up and reverse the polarities of the CTs, you're going to get bad data. So that's something to keep in mind. It's pluses and minuses. How good is the app is really important. How good is the energy monitor at the odometer function? How much energy has been used over time versus the speedometer function, which is how much energy is being used by what from moment to moment. Very different strengths and weaknesses for those. Data export, how easy is it to get data out of the unit, and do you care? Because in this case, the Sense does not have that capability, but the other two do. And then how easy is it to reverse polarities, and is it even a problem in the first place? So in my mind, I think the winner of these three is the Sense, because it's the simplest and it has the best app. And it does at least an okay job at recognizing different appliances. I think there's some work still to be done, but I also have some connectivity problems in my house where the firmware hasn't been upgraded in a while, and I suspect that will make things better too. But this will not take you that long to install, and it also happens to be, strangely enough, the least expensive of the three. It seems like I always like the expensive version of products, but this is the least expensive. The Sense, at the time of this video, is $300. The Curb is $400, and the eGauge is $500 to $600, depending on configuration. But in my mind, I like the Sense the best. So, was all of this helpful? If it was, please comment, ask some questions. I put all of my grades on these 5 different things into a comparison chart. There's a link below that you can click and get that. And if you decide to buy one of these units, there's links below that go to Amazon, and I get a small cut. So if you found this useful and you're going to buy one, it doesn't cost you more. Kindly use one of those links, and then that will help me to make more videos like this. So again, I'm Nate. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.